I'd like to introduce Linda Gibbons briefly, and we're very privileged to have her here with us tonight, rather than in the Vanier Women's Center, where she has spent a good part of the last 15 years. I think I don't know if it's always been in that center, but over 10 years of her life has been spent behind bars. Most of you know Linda's story a bit, but I'm just going to tell you she's a mother and a grandmother, a prayer warrior, a fearless witness, a prisoner of conscience, a goad for righteousness, and a defender of innocent human life. Her prayerful and principled witness in front of the abortion clinics is said to have resulted in not only the raising of national awareness, but also in the direct saving of lives of over 100 babies who would otherwise have been aborted. She has held up a mirror for our unjust society. The abortion industry, in their blood guiltiness, have tried to remove her from their path, but they have not succeeded. Linda has paid the price, and she has already spent more time behind bars than convicted killer Carla Ormoso. Those who have resisted Linda's message have not broken her resolve. They have only exposed their own blood-stained agenda. We in the CHP value the work and sacrifices made by Linda Gibbons and Mary Wagner, and the sacrificial service of lawyers like Charles Lugosi, who are helping to carry this battle to the Supreme Court of Canada, a difficult and perilous part of the great culture wars in which we are engaged. We, as the CHP, want to do our part to educate Canadians about the sanctity of life and the heroes and heroines of faith who are on the front lines and have put their personal comfort on hold for the good of society. Without further ado, I'd like to ask Linda Gibbons to come up and share her heart with us. There has been a slight change in how this presentation is going to go, so Linda and Charles have prepared something for you to share together, then there will be a Q&A period afterwards.
I'm Charles Lugosi. Here's Linda Gibbons. We're going to conduct a question and answer between us, Larry King style. So this is how we're going to do it. We've heard this introduction, Linda, of all your time behind bars and the fact that you've spent a lot of time in jail and so on. But who really is Linda Gibbons?
I'm one human person trying to prevent other human people from being destroyed.
After your mission is over, and you can tell us in your own words what that mission is, how would you want people to define you?
As someone who did what they could, I think of the woman that anointed Christ, and Jesus said, she's done what she could. What ability to take action we have is the action that we have a duty to take.
Most Canadians these days have given up the fight against abortion. We've gone down a slippery slope with other issues, yet you have not given up your protest against abortion. Why not?
Because the babies cannot articulate the injustice done to them. And I will not abandon my neighbor when they're in danger of their life.
Do you have a role model?
Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa had said, if a mother can kill even her child, how do we tell others they shouldn't kill?
Now, Linda, we're here with the Christian Heritage Party of Canada. Do you have faith in politicians?
I believe that politicians have a duty to uphold the principles this country is founded on, and I would pray that they have the courage of their convictions to stand up for the sanctity of life.
What message do you have for the Christian Heritage Party?
I think it would be like Winston Churchill's speech of never, 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 never give up.
Linda, you recently received an honor, Queen's Jubilee Medal, and some people were upset because you've spent time behind bars. Are you a criminal?
No. When unjust laws that perpetrate the crimes against humanity are allowed, it's a legal absurdity. Laws that are meant to protect life, for them to be violated with cruel and unusual punishment to little children without defense, without voice, without protection. These laws need to be challenged. Then you have illegality using law to make something that's basically unjust, make it a right. So the right to destroy your child is lifted to, elevated to a right, and it's a total perversion that law should serve the good and punish the evil.
What's it like being in jail, Linda?
And it's not, I would say, the idea of a place. It's more an idea of what do you do in the circumstances that God places you in. And there's ministry there to be done for the women, helping them, encouraging them to come out of lifestyles that are harmful. There's ministry to in faith, Bible study groups we do. Then there's the witness to the guards who are there to show love and compassion to them, that they're just not our jailers, that they are human beings too.
Who is Mary Wagner?
She's a woman of conviction. She's a daughter of a large, loving family of 12 children, 5 of them adopted. Her parents are foster parents, and that's where Mary gets her big heart for caring for others. She is a loyal Christian to her faith, that she won't compromise, won't take bail. She is loyally serving the women there and is constant in heart to meet their needs. And she's very precious to them. And they seek her out for solace, for guidance, for prayers. And for me, she's just a very quiet, gentle presence in the prison. And her friendship to me has just been a special gift from God.
Why is she following your example?
I really think primarily she isn't following me personally. I think she's following her call in Christ. She was a nun, studying to be a nun for 4 years in France, and felt very burdened for the unborn. Had done jail time in BC. Her first time of being arrested, she actually tried to talk to a girl not to have an abortion, followed the girl into the clinic, and then just sort of carrying through with the duty of the moment, started counseling other women that were there. So her original intention was not to go to the clinic and counsel, but after following this one woman in there, then she felt that this was a calling that she wanted to do.
What message do you bring us from Mary Wagner?
I think of Shelley's poem, And it's Shelley was the son of a politician, Percy Shelley, who is a poet as well. And he said, devote to justice the last hour of the day. And Mary is in this battle for life. Trudeau started this battle. And this battle rages on. And Mary is asking for support to take the case, again, to knock at the Supreme Court doors, the same as Joe Borowski did. And if you recall, the Joe Borowski trial, by the time it hit the Supreme Court, was $850,000. And we need at least $150,000 to get the ball rolling by Mary's first session of trial in June. And I'm very, very excited that Charles Lugosi is taking on Mary's case. And I've really deferred from returning to prison, which I usually do every 6 weeks. I'm out and then back. And I've deferred to stay out in order to go on a speaking campaign to raise funds, because I believe this is an opportunity. We have the right person to handle this case. Charles has written a dissertation, and part of it reads, when human and person mean the same thing in law. He has written that. When did you write that case, Charles?
I think I started in 2005, 2003 to 2005.
But it's a legal dissertation that you can actually go on to, that's been published, and it's on the internet. But we have the right counsel. Now we need the funds to take this case forward. And so I'm asking for your vote of confidence in that. We have brought with us envelopes that have all Mary Wagner's defense fund, the direct address to the bank with the account number printed right on the envelope. So we did that to make it easier for people to just put a check in it and mail it without having to look up. If you look at the Joe Borowski file that's at the back, the story on Joe Borowski, in case you weren't familiar with him, on the back of that flyer, there is also all the defense fund information. And we ask, please, put this information out on we're relying on word of mouth and people telling their friends that. So if you can take John Balsa's 2-page letter, he's the one organizing the defense fund. And if you want to know more about it, there's a little 3-page letter at the back. And again, if you can take that and share it and so that people know where we're going with this and where we need to go. And it's not a matter we can afford to do it, we can't afford not to do it.
Thank you. Now at just this part of the presentation, I'm going to, Linda, you stay here. No, I'm free. You know, I feel blessed in her shadow. And believe me, she prays me all the time, so it's very important, the power of prayer. Now, I asked the question, who's Mary Wagner? And some of you are asking, well, who's Charles Lugosi? Well, I'm born in Brantford, Ontario. I went to Western Ontario Law School, articled in Toronto, then re-articled in Vancouver, lived out here in British Columbia for almost about 20 years or so. I met a lot of people with Operation Rescue, Lawrence Brad and Steve Hendricks and Sissy Von Dane and a whole bunch of other people you may or may not have heard of. And I left my studies at Regent College, where I studied theology, in order to get back into law, because it was obvious to me I was. So I did a lot of pro-life work in British Columbia, self-financed it through my defense of murder claims. So you can, there's some justice that way. But I was counsel on the Shamina Reynolds case. I don't know if you've heard of the case, but this is the little girl that survived an abortion, and Vancouver General Hospital chose not to treat her the same way as any other newborn, and because of their deliberate lack of care, she suffered catastrophic brain injury. And then she was shifted from foster home to foster home. and ended up finally with a Christian family, and Ron Gray knew of the situation, and he introduced me to the family, and I took on the case. And it was hard for me to find senior counsel to assist me. Many of the high-profile people wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, except Tom Berger, who said, this case has money in it. And so he joined me after prominent conservatives turned me down because they said, well, we had an abortion in our family, or my wife's in favor of abortion, or something like this. So and the irony was, it was Berger who argued the case in the Supreme Court of Canada in Sullivan-LeMay, where he defended a midwife who negligently caused the death of a child that was being born, while the child was still partly in birth. And he argued successfully that that child was not a human being because the Criminal Code of Canada says, unless you're fully born alive, you're not a human being. Now that's very important because that goes to what I'm doing for Mary. But that's an important law that Berger used. But anyway, we achieved together the highest record settlement for an infant in British Columbia. And we reduced our fees on it. But it was still a big step in helping Shamina along the way. And with the money that I had made, I paid my bills. I didn't have enough money to buy a house in Vancouver. Even then it was expensive. So I went to grad school in Pennsylvania. I got a master's of law, a master's of bioethics, and a doctorate in law. And then I became a law professor, and I stayed in the state for 12 years teaching bioethics, constitutional law, criminal law, tort law, property law, all kinds of things like that. And then I came back last year, July 1st, to Brantford, Ontario, my hometown, for family reasons, okay? So I'm out here now, and I sure feel at home. And what I'm going to do is tell you that the big issue here, if you had to boil it down to one simple question, is this: can Parliament define who is and who isn't a human being? Remember I told you about Sullivan-LeMay? The Criminal Code in section 223 says that a child is not a human being unless it is born alive. I'm paraphrasing, but that's bottom line. So a child at full term that's even partway down the birth canal is not legally a human being. Now, does Parliament really have the authority to define who is and who isn't a human being along the continuum of life? Think about it. When I look around this room, I see a lot of people who are older than me. Now, if I say anybody here over the age of 60 is no longer a human being, and that's the law passed by Parliament, who'd agree with that? Come on, hands. Okay, so you'd agree. You would not be human beings. Now, is that right or wrong? Is that right? You don't like that? How about you? You like that? You feel discriminated against?
Yeah.
What about somebody who's disabled? Somebody like Shamina, my client, a little girl, catastrophic brain injury. Can Parliament say anybody with a catastrophic brain injury is no longer human being? Can they say that? But they do say that. They do say we have the power to define who is and who isn't a human being. That's the root of the case for Mary. That's why Linda has chosen this path instead of going right back to jail. That's why she's here. That's why I'm here. I think it's an important issue. You see, the good thing about your age is you can remember World War II. You can remember what the Nazis did. They were brilliant lawyers, brilliant judges. And in fact, at Nuremberg, we had a trial, not just of the SS commandants and so on. We had trials of doctors, of lawyers, and of judges, right? At Nuremberg. And the result was they were guilty of what? Crimes against humanity. Now, they said they were following the law. They said they were following orders, right? It's the same thing in Canada. Why? There's a legal doctrine, and just to make it very simple, when it's a man-made law, like a law passed by Parliament by majority Democratic vote, it is by legal jurisprudence, we call it positive law. Not because it's positive like being a good thing, or negative, the opposite, like a bad thing. Positive law is just a legal term of art, which means it's man-made law. Okay? So, Parliament, by passing this law defining who is and who is not a human being by virtue of their age or stage of development, by excluding the unborn child, is passing a positive law. In other words, Parliament is saying we are supreme. But our Constitution does not say Parliament is supreme. In fact, Parliament is not supreme. We have a balance in our Constitution. If you go back to the Charter of Rights, it says in the preamble, our founding governing principles, number 1, supremacy of God, number 2, the rule of law. And when you interpret laws, you have to go back to see if it's consistent with these constitutional foundational principles. Okay. Supremacy of God. The Supreme Court of Canada has not once talked about supremacy of God. They always pretend it doesn't exist. Okay? If you take the concept of the rule of law, it's deliberately, in my view, misconstrued. Why? Because there's 2 ways to understand what the rule of law means in our Constitution. The rule of law that we are being fed is truly ruled by laws. In other words, Parliament passes a law that says unborn children are not human beings, or old people are not human beings, or disabled people are not human beings. They say that's the rule of law. We pass a law, that's the rule. Wrong. The rule of law, in fact, has a moral component. It is justice, it is moral, and it's compatible with the laws of God. That's what the rule of law is. Passing a law that says that unborn children are not human beings is not conformity to the rule of law. That's exactly what it is. It's anti the Constitution. It's anti the supremacy of God. The closest way to truly understand what a righteous and just law is using the legal term of art called natural law. Natural law is based upon what is engraved upon our conscience and in our hearts. For we know, other than the situation of self-defense, it is wrong to murder. It is wrong to take a human life. We know it is, you don't have to be of a particular faith, country, religion, culture. You know a wrongful killing is wrongful. That, you know, and that is consistent with one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not kill. And so, when you understand those concepts and you hearken back to the very original principle that Parliament claims unto itself the power, through positive law, to declare who is and who isn't a human being, you know it violates the law of God. You know it violates the rule of law. It is nothing, in my view, but pure arrogance to assume that kind of power.
Hear, hear.
And it seems to me that people of Canada ought to be motivated to put an end to this. Parliament is not supreme. Parliament has to itself not be above the law, but subject to the law, that's subject to the rule of law, that's subject to natural law, that's subject to the supremacy of God. Period. And so, where that takes us is this. Those who say Parliament can define a human being and are in the yes camp They are positive law people. They believe that man is supreme, that man's thinking is the way things are accomplished. Those who say no say natural law is superior. It's a higher law, based upon morality, based upon justice, based on righteousness. And to summarize, our Canadian Constitution is in the no camp. Our Canadian Constitution actually is in favor of the supremacy of God. It's in favor of the rule of law. It's in favor of natural law. So our Constitution should not be denigrated. The problem with our Constitution is not the Constitution. It's the judges who interpret or misinterpret the Constitution. That's why we need Christian men and women to be lawyers, to be educated. I fully support Trinity Christian University for trying to establish a Christian law school. You know, but the deans of the existing law schools are opposing this. Why? Because they're proponents of positive law. This is where the battlefield is. Once you understand the philosophical underpinnings of the natural law versus positive law, you can easily identify which judge is in which camp and accurately predict any rulings. I see some nodding there. I think if you've experienced that, you know what I'm talking about.
I think I have.
You think you
I think
have?
you're right, Charles.
All right. So, what we have currently in Canada is a body of legal case law that cultivates a culture that's antagonistic to this party's values. And that body of case law is preached as precedent and binding precedent. So lower courts have to follow. And so we need members of parliament who are bold, who are fearless, who will think independently, who will cast aside party loyalty and party whip dictates and just do the right thing. I've not seen that kind of moral courage in this country. I truly have not. I think there are some who have that potential, but they need help. They need scholars, they need experts, they need people to get it right. They're fumbling in the dark. They need a light to shine before them to help them. And that's what you all can do. So, this is sometimes like a blank line. You women don't understand this, but every man laughed here. They understand. Sometimes men's minds just do go blank, so I had to have a blank page here. See, women can multitask. I can't. I even have trouble getting directions here. But if it wasn't for Linda, I wouldn't have got it here. So anyway, what's the mission? What is the mission then, legally speaking, for Mary Wagner? Here it is. The mission is to destroy Section 233 of the Criminal Code. The same one that Tom Berger used to acquit the midwives. To destroy Parliament's ability to define who is and who isn't a human being. Okay? Stephen Woodward tried to remove it in a very ineffective way. You know, he just didn't have the power to swing the Prime Minister behind him. And without the Prime Minister behind him, it was doomed to fail. I understand that the Prime Minister wouldn't even look up and just fumbling their papers during the time Woodward was talking. I mean, that is not leadership. I mean, that's why you're not in the Conservative Party. So, here's the point. If Parliament has failed, can a single individual like Mary succeed? Can that happen? I say yes. How? Well, what she does is she hands out roses and literature to give people a real choice. In the reception area of a medical facility, that is a place where people go to have abortions. Now, what kind of legal defense can she raise? Well, in my mind, she's committing a civil trespass. but they're not suing her for that. She's probably a nuisance, and that's a lawsuit in civil law as well, but they're not suing her for that either. Instead, they're relying on the crutch of criminal law under the charge of mischief and breach of probation. And so, in that particular case, she is arguing Section 37. Now, Section 37 was in effect at the time of her arrest in 2012. And Section 37 of the Criminal Code says a person may use reasonable force, in her case, conversation, to try to save the life of another, and in her case, the unborn child, who's placed under her protection because the mother's not protecting that child, and she's trying to save the child from an imminent fatal assault. That's what she has to establish, all those elements to succeed in that defense. So the first thing she really has to prove is a conversation force. Well, we know in criminal law, provocation can reduce what would otherwise be murder to manslaughter. Words do have force. So if you're insulted and provoked, and you result in a violent act, and you unintentionally kill somebody, that's the things. But it's words. So I'm saying words in a conversation can also be powerful. In fact, the word of God is like a sword, is it not? Think about that. It's more powerful than a locomotive. So, what about the life of another? Well, nobody is defining what other is. Now, we all assume that in the context of self-defense of others, it means a human being, right? So, right now I'm staying away from the concept or word person, because person is a legal invention, that term, because person means that you're bestowed with rights and privileges. Okay, staying away, but the simple biology of human being, okay? So, after birth, we know you're a human being, but anybody with any intelligence will also know that an unborn child is a human being too. In fact, at the moment of conception, there's a brand new living organism that develops from embryo through different stages to that of what's known as a fetus. Right? That person is the other because that's a human life at early developmental form. Just as much as human life where somebody's disabled, just as much as somebody in old age in a hospice, is still a human being. You don't lose that essence. It's a continuous process of life. So, imminent fatal assault. Well, we know that the prosecution has now admitted that all the women Mary talked to went through with their abortion and did terminate the children they were carrying. We do know that. And we had an issue of whether or not an abortion upon a fetus is an assault. Clearly a fetus is not given consent, right? Not like two hockey players who drop their gloves and go at it. That there's not an assault there, it's a consensual fight. Mind you, I don't like violence in hockey and I can't stand the game, but I know that's uncanny. But I prefer football, but there you go, all right? But I got my bias off the tape, so we always have to admit our bias. But here what I'm saying is, that's what Mary has to prove. She's got to prove that. And the Attorney General of Ontario, Liberal Attorney General, says that Mary Wagner has no standing to raise this argument. Trying to say she doesn't even have the right to raise this argument. And then saying, but if she does, they're saying that the other does not extend to an unborn child. But even if it does, Section 223 of the Criminal Code says Parliament has defined human being to be somebody who's born alive, therefore she can't rely on Section 37. Have you followed that? You know, so that's a chain of thinking, the 3 stages. See, my mind's gone blank again. Okay, now, Mary Wagner says an unborn child is covered by Section 37. Mary Wagner says Section 223 is unconstitutional, beyond the power of the government. So, and in fact, is it truly a matter of criminal law for the government to say who is and who isn't a human being? Isn't that a civil rights issue? And if it's a civil rights issue, isn't that within the domain of individual provinces? You know, because property and civil rights is within the jurisdiction of the province. So is the federal government intruding by defining who is and who isn't a human being into the sphere where it's not allowed to legislate? It's a good question. It needs to be answered definitively by the Supreme Court. Now, Section 223, of course, is not just, as we say, ultra vires perhaps the power of the government, but also, isn't it contrary to Section 15, where discrimination on the basis of age? Isn't the Parliament itself violating Section 15 of the Charter, where you cannot discriminate based on age? Isn't that what they're doing? Because if it was saying disabled people are not human beings, that would be discrimination, would it not? What if they said gay people were not human beings? That would be discriminatory, wouldn't it? What if they said anybody belonging to the Christian Heritage Party, not a human being? Huh?
They say that.
I'll take the case. The latest thing we did before was third-party records. Nobody's done this before in the context of an abortion protest, but what we did was we applied to find out what was contained in the records of the abortion clinic. The patients who were there in the waiting room that Mary had talked to, and the medical records which proved that those patients in fact had abortions. Obviously, there was panic on the other side because they said the right to privacy is so supreme and so profound that under no circumstances would they be willing to disclose who was there for an abortion that day. And they didn't want to show that the fetuses these women were carrying were destroyed by mutilation, by being cut up, by being poisoned, whatever method was used. They didn't want that to be part of Mary's trial. So we got the one concession to say, yes, they had abortions. And then we got another concession dragged out of them, which was, if a fetus is found to be a human being, then abortion is, in fact, an assault upon that human being. Major concession. And then the judge reserved decision because I said I still wanted, like in any other criminal case, the right to interview the witnesses, the eyewitnesses. I said, what if we were in a bank and there were people there in the bank who were eyewitnesses to the robbery? I want to interview those people. Now, I may not call them as witnesses, but I want to know what they have to say. Well, the judge dismissed the application, which makes Mary's case different from any other case. It's sort of like, I think Ron Ray would appreciate this. What makes this night so different than any other night? Because that's the question young Jewish children ask during the Seder. And in fact, in court, I've got Jewish lawyers on the other side. A Jewish lawyer hired from McCarthy's and a Jewish lawyer from the prosecution representing the province of Ontario. And I said, what makes this different from any other case? And I started quoting from the Seder. And of course the lawyers understood me immediately, but I think I had a Scottish judge. But anyway, but you see, this is the kind of stuff we're doing. And I think the ultimate compliment to Mary was paid by the lawyers from McCarthy. And I think there were 2 lawyers there from McCarthy, plus a student. I think their hourly rate must have been around $1,400 combined. And thank goodness it was not a civil case, because they'd probably be sticking it to us for costs. But they paid the highest compliment to Mary when they said, you know what? On these arguments, Your Honor, if Mary wins, that's the end of abortion in Canada. I don't know which way the case is going to go. But I'll tell you this. I mean, look, if I were the judge, and I didn't want my name to go up in infamy or in fame, whichever way it would go, I'd find a technicality and just acquit Mary and get her out of there. Get her out of my court. Because I know that if I'm going to find her guilty, I have to cut through all these arguments that I really don't want to decide, that I know are going to go to the next level of appeal to find her guilty. The easiest way to destroy her challenge is just to acquit her. And in one way, I think the judge has opportunity to do that, and he might do that. But in the meantime, if Mary gets acquitted, there's another client here. But I'm not her lawyer. She has an excellent lawyer, Dan Santero, but I'm sure that it will take maybe 100 Mary Wagners or 1,000 Linda Gibbons, but we just can't give up the fight. It's just too important. Are we willing to surrender to positive law and give up the rule of law and give up the supremacy of God? That's what it boils down to. So if each of you have 10 friends, tell your friends what you learned tonight. And have each of those 10 friends tell 10 friends. Just tell everybody what you learned tonight. We need to rally. Because if anything, you know, the legacy I want to leave for my kids is this. That you identify what's right. You use law as a tool to achieve justice. And you just don't give up. Because you can go to sleep at night. You can put your head on the pillow and know you've done a good day's work and that you're on the right side. I would not want to be on the side of the prosecution. I would not. So that's all I have to say. The rest of the pages are truly blank. Let me say something about Mary further, okay? You might ask why she's still in jail. Because she, in fact, was granted bail with conditions. And she refuses to abide by a previous order made by a judge as a term of probation not to go to any abortion clinic in Ontario. Okay? Now, that's why she's still there. Now, I think that there's something else I should tell you. We have needs. Prayer, money. We need legal and medical resources. We need experts. We need a political alliance with other faiths. We have Jews and Muslims who feel the same way as we do. You know, our federal political parties are no friends to us. None of them. The Conservatives, the Liberals, the NDP, they're not friends of Mary Wagner's mission. The bottom line is, you know, we have a death penalty in our country. And the death penalty is only for the innocent, not for the guilty. Isn't that kind of what the book of Isaiah talks about? Where everything's flipped. Anybody remember that scripture verse? Where good is called evil and evil is called good. Isn't that in the book of Isaiah? Yeah. See, so here's the problem. But here's the solution. One person can make a difference. Linda is one person making a difference. Mary is one person making a difference. Ask yourself, what are you going to do to make a difference? I believe we are called to speak the truth, act justly, and obey God's commands. And for such a time as this, as we call from the book of Esther, I call upon you to put your faith into action. Linda, what do you think? Did I say anything that was wrong or miss anything?
Well, I like what you said about being able to sleep at night. One time I was arrested, and I don't know if you recall David Packer. He was a policeman that went back to his sergeant or whatever and said, I cannot take duty to guard at the abortion clinic because there was protesters there. And they had police there, but not to keep the peace, so to speak. They were there to facilitate the women going into the clinic. And this police officer saw a 15-year-old girl go in. He had a young daughter at that time as well. And he realized the egregiousness of it. And so David Packer, who had 5 children, and he had been commended for rescuing the child from the fire before the police, fire people got there. So he'd been commended, a 17-year service in the police force, 5 kids to support. He eventually was dismissed from the police force for refusing to do what he did. Now, when I'm arrested, he's such a beautiful example for me. So a policeman will tell me, like Charles was saying, he'll say, I don't want to be here arresting you. I'm just following orders. And then I tell them, David Packer was a policeman, and he didn't think it was his duty to be here. And then some of them that know David Packer will say, yeah, when he lost his job. And I said, yeah, but you know what? He sleeps well at night. Yeah. So it only takes those special people to make a difference that will influence everybody else. But when people capitulate, then that silence becomes complicity. That silence becomes saying nothing, a sin of omission, when something needs to be said.
You know, just add a footnote to that, and the footnote is this. The reason why the clinic lawyers argued for privacy over the right to make full answering to family was because they said 15-year-old girls are coming in here, and their parents don't know anything, that they're pregnant, and they don't need their parental consent to have an abortion in this country. Can you imagine losing your grandchild? Can you imagine not having communication within your own family? That's pretty tough. They're perpetuating this secrecy, and it's only hurting families. You know?
Yeah, in Toronto, we have an area called the Jane Finch Corridor, and it's a whole string of public housing that goes from one end of West Toronto up to Yonge Street practically. Cologny's is an abortion clinic that's in the downtown area. Girls are taken from school. The school has a health nurse, the young teen, and I've seen girls 12, 13 years old going into Clodney with a social worker or a teacher, whoever brings them. And those girls are aborted and taken back to school without their parents' knowledge. Now, you need a parent's consent to give a child an aspirin, but to destroy her child is considered a matter of privacy.
You know, I'd like to tell you this. I called a friend of mine today who's a legal reporter for Canadian Press, where you see her work on the front page of Vancouver Sun and so on. I said to her, you got Linda Gibbons here talking tonight, you know, at the Christian Heritage Party. Oh, we don't cover that.
Oh, shame.
Just want you to know, the press has made a deliberate choice not to be here. But I'm glad to see Roadkill is here.
Yeah, the media does want to act like the public relations are for the abortion industry. And the courts want to pander to special lobby groups And these special lobby groups are really the levers of the law. And it's an intolerable situation.
Questions from the floor?
Charles, when are you expecting the decision to come down in the Mary Haggerty case?
Trial's ongoing.
Oh, you're still in trial?
Oh, yes. We're going to have evidence in this early December. More dates are scheduled for March. More dates are scheduled for May.
Okay. So there's a little bit more road to travel down this level.
Oh, yeah.
Well, speaking of road to travel, think of this. Every time Mary's got about 10 or 15 court dates coming up over the winter. Every time Mary has a court case, she's woke up at 5 in the morning, taken downstairs to a dirty bullpen, waits there for an hour and a half for a paddy wagon. She's handcuffs, put into a paddy wagon that's cold, and by the time the heat comes on, you're halfway to the court. These paddy wagons are all stainless steel, and you're just there. I mean, there's no creature comforts there. Then she gets to the courthouse, has to wait again in a dirty bullpen for a few hours until she's seen in court, and then a few hours more. Often I've gone to court and woke up at 5 in the morning. By the time you come back to court, it's 8, 9 at night. So it's a whole 18-hour ordeal. So going to court is almost a sentence in itself.
What Linda was describing, of course, is exactly true in British Columbia. You had a 14-year-old daughter, she would come home from school, having had an abortion as a result of school counseling, and it's perfectly legal. Parents said he had no opportunity, knowledge, he had no knowledge or opportunity to counsel their daughter.
You know, we got to be careful here. I mean, how many wives would like the chance to kill their husbands without legal immunity? I mean, once you give the power, I mean, to kill arbitrarily without legal punishment. I mean, just think about it. I mean, why, at one time, women didn't have the same rights they have today. Men were oppressing women. It was wrong. Then women got rid of that legal oppression, but in turn, they put oppression on somebody else, the unborn child. They just pass it along. Do you remember the story from the Bible about the person who was forgiven of his debt, and then went to somebody else who owed him money, and that person asked for mercy, but no mercy was granted. So the person who granted the forgiveness in the first place said, "What did you do?" And then punished the person for it. That's the story Jesus said. But isn't that what's going on here? You've got the wrong, it's been corrected, and then you perpetuate the wrong down the road? It's shocking. It truly is. If anything, women should be nurturing and treasuring all their children. What have we come to in a society where women are so desperate that they feel they must go through with this? And where are the men who ought to be standing up and coming along to women and saying, "I love you and I love our baby"? There's no reason for any of this. Truly, I mean, coming into this meeting, you know, I made a jest saying, you know, is this the revival meeting? Because I was looking for this place. But truly, we need a revival. Honestly, this is what we really need. We need a massive revival in this country from coast to coast. You cannot do it simply as a political voice. It has to be at the grassroots. It has to be through all the churches. The first place for repentance has to be the churches. We've allowed this situation to go downhill so fast. Do you realize that when I talked to Don Spratt, and I said to him, "Listen, Don, I'm coming out west. See if you can find me a church to speak to." The best he could come up with was the Christian Heritage Party. I said, why, Don? None of the churches would have it. Does that tell you something about our churches? Shouldn't this message be in the churches? Well, find me some pastors, and we'll come back. But find us some pastors who will open their doors.
Yeah, I am coming back in the spring to continue to do a little tour with Don Spratt.
What is
So,
it gonna be?
Be back in, well, we're starting in Saskatchewan, and April 10th, 11th, and from there, 6 weeks, in all of April and half of May. And the core of Mary's trial is what, 13 to 16. So then I want to be back in Toronto for her.
So you're out on the west coast in early May then?
April, and all of April and half of May.
Okay.
But remember, the battle does not begin or end with Mary. There'll be other Marys. For those who are raised Catholics, you know, there's a lot of beads on the road. We need more beads. Okay? We just don't stop. You can't stop. You can't leave it just to Linda. You can't leave it just to Mary. We need hundreds of people out there. And we need to involve hundreds of lawyers. Yes, sir.
I'm just so thankful that I'm here tonight. This is my first CHP meeting. I'm going to say hi to Rod, who I met in Victoria a few years ago. I just want to thank Linda and Charles and Mary for just inspiring the event. And on a personal note, this has been my personal crusade. And I just have a few comments. Number one, I'm not sure if it's in Canada or US, but teenagers need a prescription to buy Sudafed, which is an over-the-counter medication, and it could be abused because of the capsoppressant element. The other thing is, for an abortion, they don't need parental consent. So right away, it's so lopsided. Number two, the oppressive Irish abortion law was just passed. And the Irish Times never retracted the story they covered about this immigrant mother who died as a result of purportedly due to an abortion. But the truth is, be told now, it was a previous abortion, was never reported or was never disclosed because of privacy or confidential laws. But it caused a scarring that actually ruptured the uterus and eventually the mother died. And lastly, on a similar note, the United Nations Population Fund is actually coming up with this concept, sexuality education, and it's almost objectionable to mention. If you read Catholic Family of Facts, it's just mind-boggling what they're trying to teach our children now. Earlier sex, pornography, you name it, self-stimulation. It's just so appalling. So I just want to thank everyone here that has been touched by this testimony and example.
Thank you.
It's very true what you say about chemicals, because that's interesting. There's some people that propose gestational laws. Well, we can't save all the babies, so let's have a cutoff. I think someone had proposed it be in the 3rd trimester. But realize a lot of babies are being killed with this RU46, these abortion pills. And that would not cover them at all. They would have no protection. So whether you kill a child with a knife or a scalpel, or whether you kill it chemically, I mean, didn't they kill the Jews with chemical gas? So all children have to be protected from conception. If there's life there and it exists, it's human. If it's human, it's a being. If it's a human being, it should have protection as a person.
I just want to add to your comment. I also do family law in Ontario, and we have child protection laws. And recently I was involved in a case where a 6-year-old child was taken from the only person who ever knew, his mother, because the father had told Children's Aid that the mother was bipolar. And even though she was on medication, he made it seem that she was not a fit mother. So on Valentine's Day, they took the child away from school and placed the child with the father because the child was in need of protection. And yet, And yet, however unjust that was, because it was without a warrant, without reasonable probable grounds, no charter of rights, it was just so appalling to me. And yet, the child in need of protection doesn't have children's aid in those abortion clinics. All they have is Mary Wagner and Linda Gibbons. There's our children's aid right there. Only 2 of them. I mean, a child's in need of protection from imminent assault and will kill them. And they're not getting it. What a crazy world. You know, it just makes me laugh at the hypocrisy of it all. That children that are actually truly in need of protection can be taken away for the slightest of pretext under the laws of Ontario, and yet children are being killed every day in Ontario. Abortion is the ultimate form of child abuse.
Speaking of what the women in jail are powerless in the sense that they are not able to be out to determine what's happening to the children that Children's Aid has taken away. But the Children's Aid has played a part in coming into the jail. I'll give you one example. There was a Kenyan woman who was a nurse from Kenya. She was over here and arrested for practicing in a nursing home without updating her nursing qualifications. She was also pregnant. At 7.5 months, this case, I became aware of it. The doctor in the jail, who is very pro-abortion minded, she had told a woman once who was 5 months pregnant, you've broken your ankle. If you have an abortion, your ankle will heal better, which is medical nonsense. But this Kenyan woman was told by the doctor at 8 months, we're taking you out to induce labor because it's convenient for us and we don't have to. Children's Aid got involved and told her, it doesn't matter whether that baby's in or out. We'll look after the baby. So we went to Worthington of the Sun paper, because I happened to get out right then. We wrote letters to the higher-ups. I got a lawyer to write a letter to the jail saying, you can't do this, you're violating her rights. They put her in segregation punishment cells and told her, they gave her bread and apple juice to drink for 3 days. When she said, why am I not getting normal food? All other inmates, for any reason, when they're in punishment cells, they get a normal diet. They are never restricted. It's the same diet we get. So that's totally not normal. She was asked, why am I not getting my normal diet? They said, because you disobeyed a medical order to go out to see this doctor who's to do the induction. And so we made a big fuss, and eventually they didn't take her out, but she did, because of the stress, have her baby born 3 weeks early. The baby was 4.5 pounds. Now I'm just giving you the scenario of what the Children's Aid does. Now the Children's Aid goes to the father who works at home doing computer sales of used electronics, very qualified to stay at home and mind his child. He can work and be at home, no issue. He called me on the phone, and I was up in Hamilton at a speaking tour, the law group at the school and some little functions. And he calls me and said, Linda, you have to come back tomorrow. The Children's Aid is putting a 6-month custody on my child. So I'm losing the child for 6 months. They're going to take the child away. So I came back, told them cancel everything that's here in town, went back to Toronto, went to the meeting and told them, listen, he does have qualified care. I am a pregnancy counselor at our pregnancy center. I've looked after children. I am willing to move into his house and mind this baby until Eva finishes her 2 or 3 months more in jail. And so the argument that he doesn't have care is now not an issue. Then the Children's Aid backed off, and they told him, okay, we will let you have the child, but you're to have no contact with this pro-lifer. She's a criminal with an extensive record, and if you have any contact with her, we will step in and remove the child.
Who's the criminal? You?
Look how powerful, I mean, the Children's Aid may do some good work, but you can see, the Children's Aid in the beginning, when Eva told them, they're making me induce my baby, and I'm a nurse, I know my baby needs to stay where it is. The Children's Aid should have been on her side.
Now, 2 more questions, that's it. One.
So what about, we say that, woman-in-law will cooperate against sex selection for the given culture that sort of inconsistency there, like with women have the right to abortion, it doesn't sure right, but they're talking about girl babies in culture have been killed. And I just wonder how that can work out in favor of the pro-life movement.
Yeah, well, I think it's the worst malaise, but not only is the sex selection so aberrant, you have women who have twins, and they decide to get rid of one because they only want to carry one baby at a time. And who would have ever thought that that could be a possibility? So you have women destroying a child because they're saying they prefer to have a boy. We have women saying, I only want to carry one baby at a time. But this is the continued malaise, because law is supposed to mold morality. And when it becomes something where you're allowing it's a corruption of the conscience and the sensibilities. And it violates the most sacred trust, the trust between a mother and a child. But the feminists, of course, will not touch this because abortion is their sacred cow. So they will throw themselves on the altar in order to keep abortion legal, in the sense of positive law.
Let me just add something. Laws reflect the current state of the morality of the country. Absence of any kind of laws prohibiting abortion tells you where Canadian morality is at. And in terms of sex selection, the way China is going right now with their one-child policy, families are choosing males. There's something like 20 male babies to 1 female. Can you imagine looking for a wife when you're a Chinese male? It's going to be pretty hard to find a woman. Is that going to force the recognition of a woman having more than 1 husband? I mean, society is being fundamentally transformed and challenged by things like this. The challenge in India is similar to China. Again, males are preferred through cultural bias. So, this is a global issue. It's not just a Canadian issue. Think of the talent we're losing. The person who could discover a cure for breast cancer. The person who could discover a new way to feed the hungry or to do something that's useful for society. I mean, the counter-argument is look at all the potential criminals that we're not allowing to live, you know? But on the other hand, we are now in a culture of survivors. The kids you see from 0 to 30 years of age are all survivors. Their brothers or sisters were killed by their own parents. What kind of psychological damage is that for them to know that their parents would do that, deprive them of a playmate, deprive them of a trustworthy brother or a loving sister? What kind of a burden is that for these kids to carry? And how do they feel? I mean, what makes me so special that I wasn't aborted? It could have been just luck of the draw. You know, I mean, these ramifications are huge. It's contrary to the national interest. It truly is. I mean, Hitler used to give prizes for mothers who had 8 children or more. They were like heroes and treated as such because they were perpetuating the Aryan race. Well, Hitler's thinking was that look at all the talent and the racial superiority we're going to have. I mean, I don't agree with what he did. But why don't we as a society place value on motherhood? You know, women are entering the workforce, they're trained to be equal, and a lot of them are dying of heart attacks. They're becoming alcoholics. They're having troubles coping and getting into the same ruts that men have gotten into. You know, there's nothing glamorous about the problems, you know, that men are facing and that women are now bearing the same burden. Why don't we treasure fatherhood, treasure motherhood? My friend Kathy graduated a year behind me in law school. She had her locker next to mine. She achieved the gold medal, top student in the class, very bright, cute little Dutch girl. And you wouldn't suspect that she was a genius underneath all that curly blonde hair. She went to Harvard Law, and halfway through her dissertation there, her thesis, her computer malfunctioned. She lost everything she had typed up. The hardware was broken forever. She reconstructed everything out of her mind and typed it all out of her brain. She became a Catholic. She became very devout. In law school, she wasn't religious. She chose to become a Catholic. Kathy clerked for the Chief Justice of Canada. She was law clerk writing judicial opinions. She was invited by the dean of the law school where she had graduated from to become a professor, and she accepted. She was on this path of success. She later toyed with the idea of becoming a nun. And it was during that time I saw how her life had been transformed by her faith. She went back to London, where she was from, and she fell in love with a Polish high school teacher. They married, had children. She resigned her position as a professor. And I tried to have her help me in some of my cases, and she says, you know what? I've never been happier than being a mother. It is the greatest thing that I've ever done in my life. She ultimately had 10 kids. And now what she does, she took a course on learning disabled children. And she's helping them individually, one-on-one. I mean, she had the world on a plate, did she not? She could have had any job she wanted, and she proved her brilliance. And her name's Kathy Tomaszewski, and she is just the most kind, nicest person. And that's just one example. She placed a value on motherhood. Not everybody will follow in her path. But I'm just saying, there's nothing wrong with raising a family, is there? Last question.
I was giving Charles, I was giving a talk in Creston last week. And one of the people from Nelson stood up and asked me a question, just like we're doing here. He said, abortion is still in the criminal code. Why aren't we going after that section that is still in the criminal code? So I placed it, I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't know how to answer it correctly. My first thought would be that because if we go after that one section, it too will be struck in. But you're going after a much larger definition of human being, which is the proper way to go. What sections of the criminal code are still in the criminal code which would or could be challenged?
I don't know. I have to look at the criminal code. Yeah, if you want, you can write everything, I'll look it up.
I will get it for you, thank you.
Yeah, that would be fine. You know, one thing with old age, I don't remember numbers much. But I do know the substance of the law, which is, I suppose, a better solution. but I'll be glad to help you out. I'll give you my card so you can email me. Okay? Thank you.